The last thing I remember clearly before the ambulance is the sound of my own coffee cup hitting the floor. Not the pain, not Pam's voice on the phone with 911, just the cup, shattering, and the strange calm of watching it from very far away, already sliding down. I woke up in intensive care with a clot in my lung the size of a man's thumb and an oxygen line taped to my face. And the first thing I did before I asked the doctor anything, before I even understood where I was reach for my phone, because somewhere outside those walls, my family didn't know. I was wrong about that, as it turned out. They did know. They just decided the couch could wait. My name is Renata Cole, and I'm 38 years old. I run a company that sends caregivers into people's homes when they can no longer manage alone, the kind of work nobody thinks about until they desperately need it. Here is the irony I have to live with. I have spent a decade making sure frightened strangers are never left alone in a crisis. I genuinely did not see what was coming for me. 3 weeks before the ICU, I'd noticed something wrong in my leg, a tightness, a low-grade ache I'd been blaming on a long drive. My doctor frowned at it and ordered imaging and said words like possible clot in a tone that meant take this seriously. I nodded. I rescheduled the follow-up twice, because I am what my mother has always called me, the capable one. And the capable one doesn't sit around waiting on test results when there are people who actually need her. That phrase, the capable one, is maybe the most expensive gift my mother ever gave me. It felt like a compliment for 30 years. It took a blood clot to show me it was really a dismissal dressed up as praise. It meant, we've decided your needs don't count, and we've made it your identity, so you'll agree. I agreed for a very long time. What my family didn't know, or maybe chose not to examine, was the full shape of what I was quietly holding. My parents lived in a comfortable assisted living community that I funded entirely, every month without fanfare. My mother told her friends it was a wonderful facility, as though she'd simply selected it off a brochure. I don't think she'd ever once looked at where the payments came from. My younger sister Petra had been building toward buying her first home for 2 years, a house she and her husband Marcus couldn't have touched without my down payment, which I'd promised and wired and never once asked to be thanked for. I had a life insurance policy with my parents as primary beneficiaries, because if anything ever happened to me, I wanted them protected. I had named no one to protect me. I never noticed that until I needed someone to. It was a Tuesday morning. I was standing at the scheduling board in my office when the room went wrong in a way I don't have language for. Not dizziness, something denser, like trying to breathe through a wall. The pain in my chest was immediate and absolute. The coffee cup left my hand before I'd made any decision to drop it. My office manager, Dana, who has worked with me since I had one client and a borrowed minivan, took one look at my face and dialed 911 without a word. I remember her voice, very steady, telling the dispatcher my age, my condition. I remember thinking, she's good. I trained her well. I remember the floor tiles, cold against my cheek, then the ceiling, then the ambulance doors, then a specific kind of terror, the terror of trying to speak and finding there isn't enough air to make words. Somewhere in that ride, between the siren and the terrible floating sensation of not getting enough oxygen, a thought arrived with the cold clarity of something that has been true for a while finally being said out loud. I might not leave this. The last thing I had done before collapsing was figure out someone else's weekend. The emergency room confirmed it within the hour. Pulmonary embolism. The clot from my leg had broken loose and traveled to my lung, a large one, the doctor said, and she said it looking straight at me because I'd asked her to be honest, not kind. She told me the next 48 hours were the dangerous part. She told me people recovered from this. She also told me, gently, that some didn't and that I should contact my family. I lay in that bed with the monitor counting my heartbeat out loud. I reached for my phone. I called my mother first. 4 rings. Voicemail. Her cheerful recorded voice. Leave a message. I did. I kept it short because short was all my lungs allowed. Mom, I'm in the ICU at Mercy General. Blood clot in my lung. It's serious. Please call me. I waited 10 minutes, watching the clock on the monitor. Called my father. Same. 4 rings, voicemail, the same message in a thinner voice. Told myself they were in the car, in the garden, in the shower, that any second one of their names would light up my screen. I knew distantly that it was a Tuesday, and that Petra had her big move-in day, the one into the house I'd bought. My parents had promised to help with boxes. Surely, I thought, and this is the part I can barely say out loud now, surely a blood clot in your daughter's lung outranks a couch. I had been the capable one for 38 years. Even lying there, even with the oxygen hissing, I was embarrassed to be needy. I called 4 more times, 6 total, spread across 2 hours. Every single one rang to voicemail. After the 6th, I stopped leaving messages. There was nothing left to say that I hadn't already said, and listening to my own frightened voice played back in my head was making something worse. Then I made the mistake of opening the family group chat. My mother was active, right now, in real time. A photo of Petra's new living room, boxes stacked to the ceiling. A photo of my father, red-faced, grinning, holding one end of a couch. My mother's caption, "Best crew." So proud of our girl and her beautiful new home. A string of laughing emojis. I want to stop here for a moment. Because if you have ever been the one scrolling in silence while your family celebrated somewhere without you, if you have ever watched in real time the evidence that you were not the priority you'd spent your whole life being for them, you know what that room felt like. It's not loud. It doesn't feel like anger, not at first. It feels like a math problem finally resolving, like a number you'd been refusing to look at suddenly appearing on the page. I put my phone face down on the tray table, and I started thinking very clearly about whose names were written on everything I'd built. My sister texted 20 minutes later. She had seen, apparently, the message I'd sent in the group chat earlier, the one where I'd written that I was in the hospital, that it was serious. She had read it. This is what Petra sent me verbatim, while I lay in the ICU. Oh no. Crazy day here with the move, but glad you're being taken care of. Rest up. Glad you're being taken care of. As though I had checked into a hotel spa. As though the strangers monitoring my vital signs were a treat I'd arranged for myself. I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for the follow-up. The one that said, "Wait, the hospital? What's happening? I'm coming." It never came. Petra had decided in the space of one cheerful text that my emergency was handled. That professionals standing between me and the worst outcome released her from any obligation to look up from her boxes. I sat with that for a long time, and then I understood something I'd never let myself understand before. She had learned it from somewhere. She'd learned it from 38 years of watching our mother treat me as the one who didn't need anything. She was simply following the family religion, the doctrine I'd never thought to question. The one that said, Renata is fine, Renata handles it, Renata doesn't require us to show up. I put my phone down. There was one more name I hadn't tried. My younger brother Cormac is 32. He's a paramedic 2 counties over, which should have made him the obvious first call. I almost didn't make it, old habit, the instinct of a woman who apologizes for needing things even on the edge of dying. But I was tired. I was frightened. I was out of pride. I pressed his name. He picked up on the second ring. I barely got the first sentence out. "Cormac, I'm in the hospital." And then my voice, the voice that had stayed steady through every call to voicemail, through the group chat photos, through the heart emoji, cracked completely. He didn't ask a single logistical question. He said, "Which hospital? I'm already moving." He hung up before I could tell him not to. 37 minutes later, he came through the door, still in his work uniform, his face white, and he crossed the room and took both my hands in his and said 4 words. "I've got you. Stay." I cried then for the first time since the ambulance. Not because I was scared, because I had been the one who showed up for everyone, for 38 years. And I had not known until that exact moment what it felt like to have someone show up for me. It felt like setting down a weight I'd carried so long I'd stopped noticing it was heavy. Cormac stayed. He called his shift supervisor and arranged coverage. He slept in the vinyl chair. He woke up every time the nurses came to check my lines just to make sure. And somewhere in that long night, oxygen stabilizing, danger easing, mind going very quiet and very clear, I did what I do when things get serious. I took an honest accounting. I thought about the assisted living payments leaving my account each month, my parents' comfortable life, my mother's pride about the facility she'd never once asked who was paying for. I thought about the insurance policy with their names on it. I thought about Petra's house, the down payment I'd promised and not yet wired. I thought about 6 unanswered calls and a yellow heart emoji and glad you're being taken care of. I was not angry. Not exactly. Anger is hot. This was something else, the temperature of a ledger finally being read correctly. For 38 years, I had filled in the silence with excuses on their behalf. I had told myself they loved me in their way. I had treated the benefit of the doubt as a relationship. In 2 days, without trying, they had answered the question I'd never let myself ask. So the next morning, I picked up my phone, not to them, to my attorney. Her name is Sylvia Park, and she has handled my business and personal documents since year 2 of my company. She is methodical and unsentimental, and I have never been more grateful for either quality than when she answered on the 3rd ring and I told her, calmly, what I wanted. I told her where I was. I told her about the clot and the ICU and the 6 calls and the emoji and the pizza. Then I told her, I want to change my beneficiaries, rewrite my will, stop the automatic payments to my parents' facility, and formally pull back the down payment funds before they wire to Petra's title company. Sylvia was quiet for a moment. Then she said something only a good attorney would say. Renata, I'll execute whatever you tell me. But I need to ask one question first because it's my job and because I know you. Is this a decision or is it a wound? Because from a hospital bed, those can look identical. I gave her the truest answer I had. Sylvia, I've been giving these people the benefit of the doubt since I was 8 years old. The last 48 hours, they finally gave me the answer. This isn't me being hurt. This is me believing them. She told me she'd be there in 2 hours. She told me to make sure my attending physician was available. I already knew why. In estate work, the most dangerous thing isn't the documents. It's the question that comes later. Was she in her right mind? People cut out of a will love nothing more than a confused, medicated, grieving woman. I was not going to hand them that. Before Sylvia arrived, I asked to speak with my doctor, the same one who'd been straight with me from the first night. I explained what I intended. I asked whether she could document, formally in my chart, that I was alert, oriented, and fully capable of making my own legal and financial decisions. She looked at me for a long moment, the look of one tired, precise woman recognizing another. Then she said yes. Her labs, her clinical assessment, her medical judgment, I had full capacity. She'd note it and witness the signing herself if I wanted. My night nurse, a woman named Serena with 20 years on that unit, and the energy of someone who has seen everything and is surprised by nothing, agreed to be the second witness. By the time Sylvia walked in with her briefcase, the room was ready. A physician to confirm my mind, a nurse to witness my hand, a lawyer to make it real. For the first time since the ambulance, I felt like myself, not the patient. The woman who builds things properly so they cannot be dismantled later. Sylvia set papers on my tray table, the same one they'd been delivering my untouched meals on for 2 days. It became, in that moment, the most important desk I have ever worked at. She walked me through each document plainly, without hurry. First, the beneficiary change on the life insurance. My parents' names removed. In their place, Cormac and a caregiver relief fund I'd been meaning to establish at my own company for years, a financial cushion for the aides who carry everyone else and have nothing left when they fall. Second, the revised will, structured along the same lines. Third, the order halting the automatic monthly payments to my parents' assisted living account. Fourth, the formal recall of the down payment funds, signed and dated before the wire could clear to Petra's title company. I read each page. I understood each page. And then I signed my name, steadily, my physician watching, Serena witnessing, Sylvia notarizing, no drama, no tears, just the quiet scratch of a pen, over and over, rewriting my life so that it finally pointed at the people who'd actually been in the room. When the last signature dried, I looked up at the 3 women standing around my bed and said the only thing that was true. I just gave everything I had to the people who showed up. Serena, who has witnessed 100 quiet human reckonings, nodded once, like she'd seen this exact moment before and was glad this time to be on the right side of it. I did not call my family to tell them what I'd done. I did not text the group chat. There was no urge in me to announce it. The whole point of doing it quietly and correctly was that it didn't depend on their reaction at all. It was true whether they ever found out or not. Witnessed, filed, irrevocable. Somewhere across town, my mother was in Petra's new kitchen, probably rearranging someone's cabinet. Somewhere, my sister was arranging throw pillows in a house she didn't know yet had a hole in its foundation. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming about anyone else's problems. They found out through the bank. The down payment wire that was supposed to arrive at Petra's title company simply didn't. A loan officer frowned at a screen. A closing agent made an awkward call. And somewhere, my brother-in-law Marcus, a man who feels financial disruption the way other people feel weather, began making his own calls. He called Cormac first, not me. It apparently still hadn't occurred to anyone that the woman in the hospital might be the relevant party. Cormac put it on speaker. I listened. Marcus was rattled and not hiding it. The bank was saying the funds hadn't arrived. The sellers were threatening to walk. Was there some mix-up? Because Renata always came through. Renata was reliable. There it was. Renata is reliable. In a panicked man's voice, the same sentence my mother had used my whole life to mean she never had to think about what I needed. Cormac kept his voice flat. He said he didn't know anything about my finances and maybe they should ask me. He reminded Marcus, pointedly, that I was still in the hospital. There was a small, telling pause. You could hear Marcus recalibrating, not with concern, with inconvenience, as if my illness were an obstacle to my usefulness, not a reason for their presence. Even now, with the money gone, they were not worried about me. They were worried about what my absence was costing them. Petra called that evening. The first real call. Not a text, not an emoji, an actual call, since before I'd collapsed. For one brief, foolish second, I thought maybe Marcus had finally told her how serious it had been, that this was the call where she asked how I was, where she said she was sorry, where she remembered she had a sister. She got right to it. Renata, sorry. Hey, is there some issue with the down payment? The bank's saying nothing came through and Marcus is losing his mind and the sellers might walk. Did something happen with your account? 4 days after she'd left me on red while I might have been dying. I let her finish. Then I said, evenly, Petra, I called our parents 6 times from the ICU. You sent me a yellow heart and told me to rest up. A silence. What does that have to do with the house? And the honest confusion in her voice told me everything I needed to know. She truly did not connect them. The version of me that had almost died and the version of me that funded her life were, in her mind, 2 completely separate accounts. Only one of them had ever interested her. It has everything to do with the house, I said, but I'm not going to explain it over the phone. If you want to talk, come see me. You've had the address for 4 days. My mother started calling within the hour, 5 times in 40 minutes. The same phone that had sat dark and silent through the worst 2 days of my life suddenly couldn't stay quiet. I watched her name light up the screen over and over, and I felt nothing that resembled what I would have expected to feel. I didn't answer, not out of pettiness, out of geometry. I knew exactly how a phone call with my mother works. She talks, she reframes, she finds the angle where she becomes the injured party before I've had time to organize a thought. She is masterful on the phone, where there are no witnesses and her voice is the only record. I had spent 38 years losing arguments I'd entered as the objectively wronged person. Not this time. If she wanted this conversation, she would have it in person, in this room, in front of the people who had watched me sign my name. On ground where her voice was just a voice, and the paperwork was real and witnessed and could not be retold differently at Thanksgiving. I let every call ring out, the way she had let mine. My father called at 11 that night, late, alone. I almost didn't pick up. His voice was small, rough, like a man who'd spent hours in a dark room working up to something. Renata, honey. Petra told me what happened at the hospital. How bad it actually was. A long pause. Is it true you called 6 times that first day? I told him it was. I heard him breathe out, unsteady. And when he spoke again, his voice broke in a way I have only heard maybe twice in my life. I had my phone in my pocket the whole time, he said. I felt it buzz. Your mother said don't worry about it. It's probably work. Finish the couch. We'll check later. And I listened to her. I listened to her instead of, he couldn't finish it. I almost lost you, he said, and I was carrying a couch. I let him sit in that. I didn't rush to make it easier, the way I would have my whole life. But I wasn't cruel either, because my father's failing has always been cowardice, not malice, and there is a meaningful difference. Dad, I said finally, I'm going to be okay, but things are going to be different now. I need you to know that before tomorrow. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing that told me he was the only one who had actually understood. I know, he said. I'm just glad you're alive to make them different. I'll be there in the morning, with or without her. They came the next morning in a cluster, my parents and Petra and Marcus, filing in like a delegation that hadn't agreed on what it was delegating. My mother arrived first. She came in bright. A grocery store bouquet in crinkling plastic, a smile so warm and practiced it almost looked real. She crossed the room and leaned down and kissed my forehead and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you gave us such a scare. But you're the capable one. I knew you'd come through. You're the capable one." The sentence of my entire life, delivered over a bouquet, placed directly on top of the tray table where I'd signed everything away. And before I'd said a word in response, she settled into the chair beside my bed with the air of a woman preparing to manage a small, fixable problem, and said, "Now." Petra says there was some confusion with the bank, some mix-up with the house money. Let's just sort it out. I'm sure it's nothing we can't clear up together. I looked at my mother's bright, expectant face. She had no idea. I did not raise my voice. I want you to understand that because this is the whole of the decision I had made the night before about who I was going to be. I reached over, gently moved the bouquet to the window ledge, and I nodded to Sylvia, who stepped forward and placed a quiet stack of documents on the tray table where the flowers had been. Then I told them, calmly, in the voice I used to deliver hard numbers to difficult clients. I told them about the beneficiary change, the new will, the halted assisted living payments, which, I noted, I suspected my mother had never actually traced back to my account, had perhaps assumed were a pension or a program or thin air, the withdrawn down payment, which was why no money had arrived at the title company and why no amount of calling the bank was going to change that. I laid it out one item at a time. Flat, even, like coins placed on a counter. The room went completely silent. My mother's smile was still on her face, but it had stopped moving. Stranded there, disconnected from anything behind it, into that silence, I said the only sentence I had written down the night before. The one true thing I'd spent 38 years not saying. You came when the couch needed moving, so I changed everything from the bed you didn't visit. What happened next I will not dramatize, because the truth doesn't need it. My mother came apart. Not with grief, with fury. She stood. She called me cruel. She called me ungrateful. She told me I'd had no idea how serious it was, that the messages hadn't been clear, that she would have come if she'd understood, as though 9 calls and the words intensive care were a riddle in a language she didn't speak. And then she said the thing that told me, with perfect clarity, that I had done the right thing. You did this from a hospital bed? You sat here and plotted against your own family? Plotted, as though the crime in the room was my paperwork and not her absence. Sylvia, who had been standing at the window with the patience of someone who has watched many people discover that reality has documentation, spoke then, quietly, without inflection. She explained that the documents were executed properly, that my physician had logged my full mental capacity in my chart, that 2 witnesses had observed the signing, that everything was notarized, filed, and valid, and that there were no grounds to contest any of it. Serena, who had come in to check my line and simply stayed near the door, added one sentence. I was there. She was clear. My mother looked from Sylvia to Serena to the papers, and I watched her understand for the first time in my memory that there was no version of this story she could talk her way into. I said the last thing I had prepared. You called me capable, so you'd never have to worry about me. I was capable enough to stop. Petra had been frozen at the door through all of it. Now the full shape of it arrived for her. She understood that the house with the unpacked boxes and the throw pillows and the kitchen photographs, had been mine to give, and that it was gone because she had sent me a heart emoji from a couch. Her face crumpled. "You're taking my house," she said, and I felt, looking at her, something I hadn't expected, not triumph, something closer to recognition. She had been dependent her whole life on a net she never had to see, and I had spent my whole life being that net, which was its own kind of trap. We had both been failed by the same system. "I'm not taking anything, Petra," I said. "I'm just not paying for it anymore. There's a difference. Nobody in this family taught us that, but we're both learning it now." Marcus, who had been loudest on the phone, said nothing at all, which was its own justice. My father sat in the corner with his face in his hands. Cormac stood beside my bed with one hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, in a room full of my family, I was not the one apologizing. Before they left, I told them what I was willing to do, not because I owed it to them, because I am not built for permanent war, and because I didn't want to become someone who was. I would consider restoring a portion of the assisted living support, not the insurance, not the will. Those belonged to Cormac and to the people I worked alongside every day. But the monthly care, I would help with that again, on terms. Sylvia had them written down. First, acknowledge out loud, in plain words, that they had let my calls ring while I was in the ICU. Not a vague apology. The actual thing, said clearly. Second, whatever this family was going forward had to move in both directions. I was done being the load-bearing wall of a house I was never invited to rest in. If they wanted a daughter and a sister, they had to function like a family, which meant showing up when there was nothing to gain, when it was inconvenient, when it was just love and a hard chair at 3 a.m. My father signed before I'd finished explaining. His hand was shaking. He stayed that night, vinyl chair beside Cormac's, 2 men keeping watch over a woman they'd nearly lost. My mother stood at the window for a long time with her arms crossed. I didn't know if she could do it. The papers were real. The witnesses were real. There was no version of the story that put her in the right. Finally, without looking directly at me, she said 3 words. I should have come. It wasn't the mother I'd wanted my whole life, but it was true. And at 38, with a clot dissolving in my lung and my brother asleep in a chair beside me, I decided that a true beginning was something to build on. Petra bought a smaller house the following spring. She used her own money, which turned out to be something she'd been capable of all along, and I went home, finally, to a life I'd quietly rewritten to face the people who had actually been in the room. Family isn't blood. It isn't obligation. It isn't the name on a document you never thought to check. It's who picks up on the second ring. It's who comes in with sawdust on their clothes and takes your hand without asking if you need them to. It's who stays in the chair at 3 a.m, not because they'll get anything out of it, but because you're there and they love you, and that's the whole equation. If you've spent years being the capable one, the one everyone leans on, the beam nobody thanks, I want you to hear this. Being strong is not the same as being expendable, and stopping is not the same as failing. Drop the name of your second ring person in the comments, the one who'd pick up without asking questions. Tag them, let them know. And if you've been that person for someone else today, you're who this story was really about.